Hello everyone and welcome to part number 2 of the How to WARNO series. As in this one, we're gonna go over the tab that is most likely the most important one in WARNO as we get into the Recon tab, as you can't build a deck without this. This is the most essential tab in the game, as if you can't see the enemy, you can't shoot the enemy. And these guys here are essential to do that. So every deck has to use that. Even infantry is not quite as important as this. Like, we made some videos about how to use the 5th plane day without infantry, but we haven't done a video about how to use a deck without recon, because that is really, really hard to do. So let's start with the strengths and weaknesses, and then we will go over the 5 use cases for Recon and also talk a bit about the difference and the big diversity that this tab has. So let's start with the strengths, and they are relatively straightforward. These guys, they have good optics, and they have the optics to spot the enemy and get that going, and they usually also come with good stealth, so that they can hide from the enemy's eyes and really can be your eyes on the battlefield. And then another important one is that for most decks, thanks to their forward deployment, these are the first units on the front line. The forward deployment of the recon units, that recon deployment is a really key factor in how an engagement starts as well. So yeah, relatively straightforward strengths here. And the weaknesses are pretty straightforward as well, as because you have good stealth and good optics, you pay for that with combat cost efficiency. As if you compare them to other units that are having the same raw stats when it comes to firepower and survivability, they cost more. Plus, importantly, they also get lower availability, and that means if you trade pound for pound with other units, that's not what you want to do. So you either want to strike out of the shadows or combine these units with others and really make a combined arms. And yeah, that leads to the combat roles as well. So yep, short segment here. Let's move on to the combat roles, as this is a pretty diverse field for recon units. And the first role of recon is the basic frontline observation. This is what you use your standard recon infantry squads, and especially your ground surveillance radar recon infantry squads, and your vehicles with very good or exceptional optics for, as those are there to help your other units on the front line to see the enemy and be able to shoot at them. So you want to have them where the rest of your forces are, or slightly ahead of them, and see the enemy and let your other units be able to light them up. So usually in combination, a bit in cover so that your units don't get shot, and just be there constantly. Especially if you have a good building, just put an infantry in there so that you have better vision of the whole battlefield and can engage the enemy. So that's the role that everybody kind of gets about recon, and you want to use your very good or especially exceptional optics recon units for this, and just set them up nicely and get them going. The second role is recon enforce, or stirring the hornet's nest. And this is where you want to use your recon tanks, your recon IFVs, your recon squads like Jaegers for as part of the role, so that you move forward and let the enemy try to shoot you, because that way the enemy's stealth will go down even further and your recon will for sure see them. Even your good optics ones like the tanks will then be able to see the enemy, and if you have your other units with them, then you can retaliate onto the enemy. So really important to have one of those with your pushes, so that your other units that only have normal optics or worse can then see the enemy and shoot back at them. And as I said, some units with better survivability obviously are better for this. You usually don't quite want to do this with your 4-man or 2-man sniper squadron or so, and really want to use the higher survivability units or just more affordable, like cheaper APCs for this role. The next role is area control, and that especially is important combined with the forward deployment of recon, as they can gain you spaces and also keep the enemy out of spaces. And for this, you want to use recon units that have some AP power and that can get into the front line decently quick. So MX-10 RC is one of the most famous one of these kind of units that can get into the front line and then just from their vantage point can shoot everything that tries to get in there. And another good example is the TOW 2 Dune buggy that can get fast to the front line and then keep the enemy out. And on the infantry side, recon infantry with better AP power, like the scouts with the lower 80 and other units like that, can be pretty good at this as well. So those kind of units, you want to get into a spot early on and then just deny the enemy to be able to get there so that your other units then can get in there as well, and that gives you an advantage just position-wise on the battlefield. So it's one of the more combat-oriented ways of using recon, and a really, really key factor, especially in decks that don't have other forward deploy options. And this brings us to real-line observation, and with that also then real-line sabotage. So let's start with the observation part. As for both, you have to get your recon behind enemy lines. So you want to use small squads that are expendable for it mostly. Snipers are really good in this because they get extra stealth when standing still. Or you want to take light vehicles that can get past the enemy quickly so that the chance of them being detected is limited in time, and then they can get into a spot behind the enemy. So that is really useful because then you might not quite see what the enemy is doing on the front line, but you can spot for both the reinforcements coming in, so you know what is going to arrive where, you know where the enemy is reinforcing, and you also get to know where their artillery and AA might be, so that you can then send in your artillery or your planes accordingly and hit the enemy real line or dodge the enemy AA at least. And then real line sabotage is combining that obviously with hitting the supply lines directly. So for that, you want to get your autocannon like a Fox or an ML90 next to the road and shoot it best into the side armor so that you can even destroy things with a bit more punch, like side-shotting a tank or an IV and one-shot killing them if you can, or taking recon squads with good AT weapons like a lower 80 and get them behind the lines and shoot enemy units coming by. Transport helicopters can help with this as well, on maps, for example, like Two Lakes, where you can fly behind the enemy lines and then get to the spot behind them. So yeah, real line, a really important part of the recon as well, and something that only a couple of other units outside of them can do, because having better stealth is pretty important for it. And then the final part is aerial observation. And this is especially strong right now. We see in the current meta a lot of play with recon helicopters. We have seen that in the past as well. And with the current stats of recon, they perform really well. And they have two brethren as well, drones and aircraft. And they all do something similar, but also a bit different. So they can look behind cover, which is really powerful. They can look over obstacles and give you a view that other units will struggle to get into position for. And they also can go a bit deeper for a short amount of time than your normal recon unit can do by flying directly over the enemy, with trade-offs for all these units. The trade-off for helicopters is, yes, they are fast and can hide, but they can be shot by most things and are usually dying quite quickly then, as AA units are often also better against them than they are against aircraft. Drones are slow and they take a while to arrive on the front line, and you can't start the game with them, so they arrive usually later than your normal recon units on the ground. With recon helicopters, you can do an opener, see the enemy deployment, but they are harder to shoot down than a helicopter, and they can circle around there and maybe dive a bit deeper as well. And then aircraft, they can use weapons. They are a bit harder to shoot down, but they're also expensive and they can't stay around as long. So yeah, especially the 0810 can be really powerful, but they aren't as a long term of a recon, and they don't give you as much intel over a longer period as helicopters and drones, especially helicopters that can stay on the front line the whole time. But all of these are really some unique way of going around, and that's why a lot of decks currently have at least one of these options in them as well, if they have the chance to take them. And we see so many Recon helicopter openers to get intel about what the enemy is doing on a bigger scale, because you don't just see the first layer, or you don't have to invest a lot of time to get your units in the real line, but you can see for a short while a bigger picture of what the enemy is doing before they most likely get shut down, or you have to take them out and bring them into a safer position again. So yeah, those are the Recon roles. Let's get to a bit of a conclusion and some bigger picture. And I want to start with talking about two traits that we haven't covered yet and that you might come across. They're not super impactful, but I just wanted to give you a heads up here. And the first one is the jammer trait. This one is attached to a couple of Recon helicopters, and it reduces the optics of other Recon units of the enemy team in a circle around it. And if your unit is affected by an enemy jammer, you will see this signal. That just means that your optics have been reduced from exceptional to very good if you have an exceptional optics unit, and it means that your Recon just sees a bit worse. So it's not super impactful. It just is a nice debuff to the enemy on some very good optics helicopters that also pay for that though. And then the other one is Sickened, something that we don't have too many units of yet, only 3. And this gives the unit a circle around it, and then whenever a unit enters that circle, there will be a symbol flaring up to these units, and that will give you the information that the unit is within that circle. And then there is an inner circle, and when they enter there, the color will change, so that you know that an enemy is around, but you don't know exactly where. You can use that to triangulate the position of enemies if you use multiple of these units, but it's all a bit complex, and it's not something that all that many people invest time into, especially not in 1v1. In team games, it can be a bit more impactful, especially if you use it well with artillery, but it's not really a massive change from how you use Recon otherwise, and they all have very good optics as well, so they just function as normally Recon units on the side of it as well. So yes, Recon is a very flexible tab that can assist you by plugging your weaknesses for some decks and enhancing your strengths in others, but the most important part in the end is still that you want to spot the enemy with these guys. So even after all these talks about how you can use them in combat roles, focus on spotting the enemy first. And spotting the enemy and getting information, getting intel is key in these kind of games. So use the frontline observation for the most part, and then something like aerial to get more information, and only use these units in combat when you can assist them with other units for the most part, or you gain a major advantage out of this. And that's why you usually want to have at least 2 units that are good at frontline observation in your deck. They might be good at other things as well, and you can switch them around for area control and so on. So it's not exclusive, but you want to have at least 2 units that are good at that, with very good or exceptional optics if possible, to spot the front line. Usually, often you take 3, and this is what Recon is all about. You don't fight the major combat with it, but they are always there to assist, and if you don't have them, you will feel it. So yeah, this is it for this video, and if you want to see the next one, which will be about tanks, maybe subscribe down below so you don't miss it, and thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.